Welcome to Funders on Fundraising. I'm Jeff McDougall. I've been raising money for mission-driven work for over 30 years and rethinking what real power looks like in our sector.
And I'm Kelly James with Education First Consulting. I've been a program officer, a philanthropic strategist, and someone trying to make grant-making more human, direct, and transparent.
This podcast is a candid conversation about how money really moves and how we can build authentic, effective relationships between funders and fundraisers. We're co-produced by Chris Lawrence and Andrew Calloway and Decca Hussein-Wetzel of Urbanist Media.
Today's guest is Misty Avila, a fierce community leader in California's Central Valley and longtime organizer who now works in philanthropy, bringing a frontline sensibility into rooms that don't always know what to do with it.
We talk about how restaurant work shaped her politics, what it means to straddle survival and strategy, and how she's trying to fund her community without becoming the kind of funder she used to protest against.
There's information about imposter syndrome, RFPs as violence, and why funders should not shy away from the real power dynamics. Misty keeps it honest, and it's refreshing. Let's get into it.
And so, Misty, young, idealistic, growing up, and you chose not to be an investment banker for some reason. What set you on that path as opposed to the other? This path as opposed to the other?
I'm not sure I even knew what an investment banker was growing up. My entire professional experience in my family consisted being inside a restaurant. And so my mom was a career waitress. My dad was a career cook slash just grown child of just living the good life. So I think I just kind of knew from an early age that I was going to be doing something with my life that was serving communities and serving people and bringing people together and hopefully getting out of the restaurant industry.
Was there an element of that service in your parents' restaurant business?
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah. I talk about this all the time. I do feel like most of the skills that I have or like bring to any of my space is all about what I learned in being a community hub in the restaurants and like the dynamics of the back of house to front of house. So there's a power dynamic within a restaurant where there's like the back of the house, and typically it's like people of color, Mexicans, like in the instance of my family. And then the front of the house is like young white college waitresses serving people. And there's like a real divide. And I feel like my whole life, it was really about walking that divide and like bridging it. And I see how I replicate that in everywhere I go. And I see even myself, just even the word authenticity really bothers me because my dad being Mexican and my mom being a Russian Irish immigrant, I just have always really struggled with the word authenticity and have much more been about like connection and bridging. So I think I learned that from an early age. And I have that very California story of being the first in my family to have graduated college, being, which is the ultimate dream of my father, not even having graduated high school, and dedicating his whole life to restaurants. And then I was the first of my three sisters that was not pregnant at 21, which was a big accomplishment in my life because my mother was also a teen mom and then pregnant at 21. When I became an adult, I had access and actually had an opportunity to even see wealth or understand it or be around it. But growing up, it was really just about like serving your community, serving your family, kind of being in this underground survival of like having a village with each other. And even when I started in philanthropy, because I've been in nonprofits my entire career has been in nonprofits. I started in nonprofits in college. Before that, I was in restaurants, and then my restaurant life got to end around 30 when I got a real big normal salary that you cannot have two jobs with. And when I first started in philanthropy, I mean, you could tell me like $10,000 is $1 million and $3 billion is a zillion. Like I had no sense anything over $10,000 just felt like a billion zillion dollars. So I almost was very laissez-faire about spending money, being around money, because I think just kind of like almost an arrogance around it because it felt so unfamiliar and funny to me, which I think served me in a way because I think people perceive it as like maybe I do have wealth. um, but yeah, so I think I just once you're on that nonprofit industrial complex track, you eventually end up in philanthropy or in a funding space, especially if you're a person that is looking to build a family and buy a home and kind of participate in society in those sort of ways. So that's how I got where I'm at. I feel like I sold out most of the time, but I also am trying to harness the opportunity that I have.
When you look back to kind of early in your career, what were some of those like personal trade-offs that you were making when you were thinking about, here's my family, the situation that I grew up in, versus like the path that I want to write for myself that feels like it's aligned with like the values that you developed still?
Man, I mean, my family, to be honest, for them, it's really like an individual story of like, get educated, get a job, and like, we want to see you survive. And I think once I started getting into community and nonprofit work, you almost build a community around that. And you have this perception, it's easy to have, and it's real, this perception of academia, funders, or people kind of in these positions of power. And there's a line or an invisible line or real line around like, which side are you on? And if you step over, you kind of sell out. And I think it's almost how down are you? And so I think there was some almost ego involved in it of just like my own perceived self identity in activist or community spaces. And then just that whole other layer of just imposter syndrome and always feeling like the youngest person in the room, the only woman in the room, the only person with any like Mexican identity in the room. And it's not even fair to say it because most of the time people don't perceive me as that when they first engage with me. So I think there was just like a lot of not good enough as well, kind of later on top of that. So I first got kind of an institutional job when I went to UC Davis. And I literally spent so much time stressing out and talking to people that I care about. Like, would they still want to hang out with me if I worked at a UC? And like, that was such a big jump. And like, I had to resign to the fact that I was surrendering and selling out. I just had to kind of, at some point, you know, value medical benefits more.
You've used the construct of selling out a few times. Like, let's unpack what's inside of the construct of selling out. Is it just about getting paid, or is it more than that?
Oh, I mean, it's never about getting paid. No, not about getting paid. It's much more of like stepping into a system that I know has power dynamics that go against my core values.
Do you think it's possible to carry yourself with both identities at the same time, or do you think it's always a choice?
I mean, I'm trying in my more older years to not be black and white about anything and not be so extreme that it's one or the other. But I do feel like it's a practice and it's a set of choices that you make each day and how you engage in conversations and how you engage with people. And it's much more micro than macro, which I had perceived it as before. So I don't know if it's possible, but I think it's like worth trying. That makes sense.
I mean, I think that does make a lot of sense. Yeah. And I feel like several things that you said, like just as another biracial woman, you know, trying to find like your right journey and through the space. And I don't know if it's like too quick to jump here, but really interested in hearing like what did you think philanthropy was? And, you know, kind of what did you like, who did you identify behind philanthropy before you actually got behind that curtain? Like the pre Misty of that journey and, you know, thinking about your values and what was like your image of philanthropy before you entered into it?
I mean, just a lot of shit talking, you know? I think funders are easy to pick on. I think it was an ethos of like speaking truth to power. I think there was a lot of analysis around like, why is this system set up in a way where we need grant money to survive, yet there's no accountability or structure for a funder to have to give you that money. And yet they want you to have a salary, but there's no guarantee that there's health benefits. Like, I think I just always felt like at its core, like being at the mercy of funders was not appropriate. And then I also like had a little bit of a like, and I got this a lot from Gunner at Aspiration, where it's like funders are not our audience, like the people who serve our audience, and really trying to shift the nonprofit folks to not cater so much to their funders and not try to message to them or build websites for them or build programs or grants for them and find different ways of demonstrating partnership, which served me a lot and I think helped me a lot even in the role I'm in now. But I definitely felt like funders were suits and power, and I also felt like maybe they were kind of dumb, kind of like how like in all the kids shows like the parents are always like really dumb and the kids are super smart and like getting away from stuff. So maybe I thought like they didn't get it. They were disconnected. They are not on the ground, and that was actually really humbling when I started working in this space. So I was like, oh wow, there's actually like people that really care, and like there's people that I want to that I look up to and I believe in, and they have a vision for the world that is actually really cool. And like it was really humbling at first just to realize like I'm the dumb one. So yeah, that was kind of my perception kind of pre-post, and just realizing like how easy funders are too, and like how human they are and how they have no recognition at all of what they represent, even myself, and that is also humbling because you just realize that like everybody just wants to be liked and everybody wants to do good for their boss. And there is this sense that like funders are above that, but they're not. So I don't know, lots of feelings around the different shifts in my career.
I think one of the things that I've tried to carry in the work that we currently do and try to encourage other folks is to sort of pick away at this notion that there's an us and them in the funder grantee sort of framework. And a lot of that is grounded in what you've just shared, right? Like everyone's human, everyone's trying to do the same thing. Coming back to the forced joke at the beginning, like we are all intentionally not investment bankers for a reason, right?
Yeah.
That's some sort of
Although, now that I know what it's about, you guys, in 10 years, I might be in a different position.
So
I was going to say, if I knew how to be an investment banker, I
Yeah.
might be one, but
Yeah.
yeah, I also didn't really know that investment banking was an option growing up. And for me, the one that I was always wished that I'd known was consulting. That the idea that you could get paid a lot of money just to like teleport in and solve someone else's problem and then leave. I was like, wait, why didn't anyone tell me? Right? That was a possible career path. I'd love to hear more about those first moments because I know you mostly in the nonprofit activist seeking money sense, but I'm curious to hear sort of what some of those humbling moments or realizations were when you started being in funder only spaces or funder dominant spaces. I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, and I'm being nice right now because I will say like they are the most bougie spaces ever, and like I sometimes can't be in a room of only funders and try to actively avoid it. But that being said, if you can break that funder only dynamic and get folks in a space where they are being themselves and being able to share in a vulnerable way, or maybe having some buffers in the room that are not funders, and no one's asking anyone for money. I think that in any direct way, you're always kind of asking everybody for money. But I think that I was searching for a long time for people to, looking at the leaders of the organizations that I'm in and thinking like, would I want to do your job? Do I want to be like you? Just kind of like searching through some my own journey of like where I want to end up. And in my last few years in this space, I've actually found some of those people where I'm like, oh wow, you like own a small jewelry shop and you also like do the funding for this community foundation, and you're also a working parent, and you also have like a lot of mental health issues, and somehow you're still like managing to pay your mortgage and have a family. Like, I'm seeing things that just never felt accessible to me. And maybe it's the fact that everybody in this space has a good salary, so like some of those realities can make it happen. But I think it was just humbling for me to see how human everybody was. And I consider a lot of my work an experiment. Like for some reason, I have a very / no fear around like if this doesn't work out, I'll find something else that does. So I do take risks sometimes in just the way that I communicate to people. But in kind of this experiment of being in philanthropy, I've recognized that like I can be myself pretty candidly and people respond positively to it. So like me bringing a perspective that maybe is not around traditional philanthropy. Some people see me as radical, but I think it's actually helped me to have some really good allies in the space that are struggling being in their institutions. But just to say that, like, it's not the worst job in the world.
That and consulting isn't either. I mean, I feel like, Jeffrey, we're going to have to put a positive spin on consulting, talking about like this human component or humanizing philanthropy. Wondered if you just, I think, talk more specifically about that. Because I think there's like the people that work in foundation, you work for a family foundation, just kind of understanding like those different dynamics across the humans within those organizations. And then even outside, right? Like I'm sure a lot of the foundations you're partnering with, they're not all the same. And so what have you learned just about like the humanizing aspects of foundations and philanthropy more generally, but being inside one, but now I'm sure interacting and being in those like funder rooms?
Well, I will say I am sometimes naive to dynamics of wealth, like secret codes of wealth of like, oh, that person has a lot of wealth, so we treat them this way, or this person is CEO of this, or that person has a PhD. Like I am admittedly naive. So I just treat them as humans first. And maybe in a couple years when I'm deeper in this work, like I'm going to lose that, which is going to suck once I'm not like such a rookie, understanding the secret social systems. So one of my survival tactics in philanthropy has like been not to think too much about funders and not really build or organize with funders, although I'm starting to recognize that as a really strong fundraising tool. So I might start doing that in general. So essentially, I have a back of the cereal box indigenous perspective around money, in that resources like this wealth that is in these investments around philanthropy, it is somebody's family's wealth that they earned in some way. That's great. In order to survive in my role, I definitely see it more as like a holistic set of resources to serve community. And I don't have any empathy or drive to care about what a family would want or what a donor would want or what a funder would want, or like empathize with them what it feels like to get rid of money. Like I understand that perspective, but I don't know that it serves us. I think it's much more of like I am taking my role as a gift, a platform, an opportunity to provide and usher and support people in this really messed up philanthropic grants landscape. When I'm working from that space and mindset, of just kind of like there's an abundance of resources out there and nobody owns any of them and we need to take care of each other, I am able just to connect with any human. I don't think about it as connecting with the funders in the room or the grantees in the room I just think it's from just a place of human to human connection, which I even struggle with myself. Like that's all my own healing I need to do. And like it brings up all the issues of life of like being vulnerable and what it feels like to have the anxiety of giving them too much information or not enough information or having to say no or avoiding them because I don't want to say no, or saying yes, but then someone I think just like allowing that space for all of that messiness to exist, and not feeling like everything has to be buttoned up and perfect, and not feeling like we can't have a candid conversation, is where things get hard for me to exist in. So I think the humanness just comes down to like the messiness. And with her funders, they don't like that. They don't like messiness. They do not like it. It really freaks them out. So I think like I like to poke on that a little. And I think there's also a madness in Funderland around program officers thinking that their role is to make the board happy or somehow present something to the board or set up a meeting for the board or present something to the board. And then we spend all this time and energy doing it. And sure, maybe your proposals get passed because really they have no idea what's going on anyways. And usually they just say approve. Okay, so that happens. And then I see it all the time with funders. It's like, this becomes their life, this cadence of these catering to these board meetings. And it's like so dysfunctional because you should be catering to the people that you're partnering with. And your board honestly should be an afterthought, or like, you know what, just stay up the night before till midnight and just make it happen. Just make something happen. So I think that what happens in nonprofits, how nonprofits treat their boards and treat their funders, it also happens as kind of funders replicating those cycles to their board. So funders often see themselves as victims in these situations. They operate as victims to their grantees, and they operate as if they have some board they have to answer to or some family they have to answer to. And I think it's just such bullshit because they're in such a space of agency, driving the narrative, cultivating relationships across the space. There's no city council meeting where you go and tell all the funders what you need done. There's no public budget that gets voted on. There's no journalists that are investigating how philanthropy is messing up the world. There's no public accountability systems around philanthropy besides maybe like a tax code that is an IRS issue. I guess like the lack of accountability in the system, and then just the very fragileness of people's perception of their role in philanthropy, I think is very harming to allowing real humans that are doing this work to be effective partners.
They're both playing a part in a way.
Yeah, playing a part.
As we think about this dynamic between foundation and those fundraising, as we think about this dynamic between foundation and those fundraising, as a fundraiser sitting in a foundation, like what's your advice to those people that are like trying to find that path in? How can those fundraising make sure that they're finding pathways into philanthropy that align with either their values, their content, or what they're going to do? Like, how do those matches happen in a way that feels more authentic?
I hear what you're saying. And where I've seen success is these micro engagements and network weaving to build meaningful relationships so that there's opportunities for true shared passion to emerge and mutual benefit connections of working together. That can look different for different types of people depending on how they, some are more transactional, some are more strategic, some are more lovey-dovey. But I think that that's just like, at a happy hour or at an alumni event, like how money moves. Like, I don't think it's any different for nonprofits and funders. And so I think instead of having these institutional funder briefing, like I've never seen anyone get funded from a webinar that's about a funder briefing. I just haven't seen it unless you've had a prior connection, you already intended to fund, and you're showing up because you're a good person. So I think we need to shift away from convenings, webinars, structured training, structured introductions, and start creating more moments for spaces where we know that matchmaking can happen. So I'm practicing this, and I know someone else has done this before and is doing it, but I think it's much more about, even in my work in the Central Valley and with the funders we're working with, like the authenticity part is like, you're really trying to get something done to change the world. And like, these people are really trying to do that same thing, but maybe in a different cool way that you're not thinking about, or in a way that you should know about, or in a way that's really super aligned, and like, y'all should talk. So I do want it to be authentic. And I think that's what makes the most meaningful. I'm also okay with people just giving their money and not really knowing too.
So I was wondering, from your perspective, if there's anything that you've learned or has been surprising about like the actual motivations behind these families and behind this wealth, and if some of that was surprising to you or it was what you expected. Like, why are they involved in this process in the first place?
No, I think it's like really good, amazing people, and they're involved for really solid reasons. I haven't ran across like toxic wealth do-gooders. This is not the dynamic that I've run into. It's just more of they're really solid humans that are wanting to make change. Typically, I want to help achieve the mission in the world that they see. Like, I'm not staying up at night like wondering how to do that, because they are starting from a place of access and resources. And to be fair, like I think grantees, whatever you call that, is starting from a place of access and privilege and resources too. Like, but it's not what keeps me up at night. Thinking about the leaders of color in our community that are doing this under resourced, or thinking about just like the absolute inequity for like any Black women leaders keeps me up. So I guess I don't have a nuanced answer because it just feels like an easy problem.
One of your answers a moment ago, Misty, you started getting tactical. One of my obsessions is how these high-end constructs of power and access and privilege translate into like where you sit during the coffee break at a conference, and how you catch someone like very specific micro tactical aspects of how this actually works. My question to you is, if you could wave a wand, how would you be sold? How would someone catch your attention? How would someone bring something to your attention? And what do you think your own blind spots and biases around that process and around that dance?
I also learned from Gunnar at Aspiration a long time ago, like, do your work and like do it well, and meet the needs of the folks that you're working with, and the rest will be taken care of. And so I think that sometimes it's also about doing good work, and that network and word of mouth is powerful over time. And so we don't have to get so technical sometimes, and I don't want to work from a place of scarcity. I'm really trying to practice abundance in the way I speak about this stuff, even more abundance than the resources I have and my influence with my job.
So one of my fun little poking people is recognizing that no matter who you are and what you do in life, you not only can be sold, but you are susceptible, like everyone is, right? And while I believe there's a lot of folks who want to believe the work speaks for itself, or humans are rational, or I sit back and make decisions based on data, none of that is actually true. Dynamics and interpersonal relationships, and how aggressive you are and what context you're in, how you speak, do you swear? Do I drop hints for you to follow? Do I come right to the point? Do I get social first? So I'm curious, like, what is the sort of perfect way, if I was listening to this podcast and I wanted to start building a relationship with you and your portfolio, how would I tactically go about doing that? How would I catch your attention? How would I carry myself? What would I be talking about?
Oh yeah, I have so many biases. One, I tend to think in like concentric circles. So a lot of my work builds off of the work I've done before. So if I worked with you in the Central Valley in the prior 20 years to being a funder, there was a good chance you were the first people that I reached out to when I started this role. So I think there's an inherent bias that I have of just I'm working from the network that I know. And maybe in some ways, if you look at that in the bigger picture, like that's a great thing. Like somebody that doesn't come from wealth, somebody that is from the community, that has a multicultural background, that has worked in the nonprofit space, maybe that's a good thing. But still, the network bias is there. And I like to work with people and get to know people. I'm very clear that people are pitching me and I'm okay with that. That's literally like the purpose. I don't care if people are chumming up to me to like be homies with me to like get funding. Like I do not care about that. Like I'm in for it. Like bring it on. I don't care if you're using me for any particular reason because I typically will only work with folks if I feel like they're truly representative of the future that I hope to see in the world. So I do bring my own bias in, if I'm a tool that can be used to access that, that's great. Like use me. So I definitely have a bias for emerging leaders of color that have a vision for like the world or the communities that I know and love. I think that there's a really interesting paradigm shift in philanthropy where before it's like you email people or you show up at a networking event. And I think a lot of the ways that people get on my radar now are through social media and text. So I think that's a real interesting shift. Like people think they have to email me, but it's like if you actually just texted me or like sent me a DM on Insta, you would probably have a better chance to have a conversation with me because my email inbox is like a death hole. Or if you're recommended from somebody. So yeah, I mean, it's so crappy to say out loud actually, but I do think that's how you could probably get to me pretty easily. I do try to filter myself. So like I'm not just raging with my biases. I try to filter myself with like really having a clear set of values that we're working from. We have a decision matrix that basically says like very basic components. Are these folks headquartered in the Central Valley? Is there shared mission alignment? Is there reciprocity in the relationships? Is there mutual aid and benefit? Is there opportunities for us to grow together and it not just to be like, are we starting from a place of having that power dynamic or is our first interactions like breaking it down? And I've tried to share that with anybody I'm working with. So anytime I start working with folks, I will share with them like how I think about the work so that they at least know why I'm making decisions. Those are all my long thoughts. I'll stop.
I pick up on that like, kind of same thread a little bit, the like, how are you sold? And maybe ask, like, do you have an example that you could share, if we want to call it being sold, where you feel like it was really aligned to some of your values that I feel like maybe I would refer to as like more disrupting philanthropy versus those where maybe like your biases are still playing into some of the things that maybe still make you uncomfortable about philanthropy. And this is a place to celebrate yourself and one of the maybe kind of relationships or grants that have come out that you feel like were more disruptive to how philanthropy operates, but still allowed access to maybe a group that didn't have it before.
There's an organization with a really amazing leader in Fresno. She was just starting out her organization. So basically, they had a little bit of seed funding from one of the statewide funders, but essentially no funding. And I had a conversation with her just about like her vision and her work, which I think is interesting. Like that was our first conversation. Like I don't even know if she knew I was a funder. And I just was so inspired and moved by her work and her vision and was like, I'm going to do whatever I can to like figure out how to use the access that I have to support in a way that's meaningful. So I think that's another really, really important thing. It's like, don't start connecting people with funding if you haven't talked to them about how they want to be connected to funding. We were able to give small grants over time. They grew to larger grants, and it's all based off a relationship. Like we would have like 3-hour conversations about racism in Fresno or like funding for executive leaders of color or just like how messed up philanthropy is. So like I would dare to say they were real conversations, regardless if funding was on the table. And then something happened where we gave them a larger grant, which is great. And we were able to get them a multi-year grant. And this is over years, but by giving them that grant, it kind of shifted the funding. So there was another part of their work that we were no longer funding that we had always funded. And it was just kind of like a technical thing. And she called me up and in like the most graceful way was able to kind of come at me and like kind of check me and let me know that happened. But she did it in a way, it was like through our conversation. We just had like a solid grounding already. that I recognize, okay, they have a $75,000 deficit in this one program area. Like if it took me like the whole call to like pick up on it, but then I was able to go back to my own budget, called up a couple colleagues that I know fund in this similar area and able to pull together the resources to get her the 75K like within a week. And a lot of this work is like, how far will someone stick their neck out for you? How much are they willing to make the case? So I felt like it was an example of like we had built a strong enough relationship that she could be honest with me with feedback, and she's done it other times as well. And that also set us up to be able to respond in a way that was positive rather than just another story of foundation changing its strategy midstream and like effing over the grantee. And then for her, she kind of gave me some feedback later. It helped her understand how philanthropy can work or could work, or like recognizing that a lot of the barriers that are put up around it are sometimes fake or driven just by like a leadership decision rather than like any actual real rules. Which I think once people realize that about philanthropy, it's actually good too, because Kelly, I think you're an exception to this because I think that you're actually pretty good at following process. But I think a lot of people use process as in a way to weaponize or a way to kind of remove themselves as the decision maker when often they truly have influence or they are the decision maker.
Yeah, that was really compelling to hear how that played out in your actual work and in a relationship with a grantee.
I also love how there's a lot of themes here, like one of which is you keep using terms like a real conversation. You mentioned she might not even known that I was a funder. Like all of these things imply that money isn't the middle of the conversation. Money isn't the focus. It's the work. It's the project. It's the benefit. And the resourcing of it is almost the second chapter in that conversation as opposed to the primary focus. Think that's valid?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that you never want to talk about money at first. I think you want to ask questions and get advice. I just feel like I don't want to be cynical, but, I think there is like an ego part of it. Maybe it's not ego, maybe it's real.
Are there things that you're explicitly no longer interested in or leaving behind, program models, approaches, things that you think are failed ideas that you're not interested in exploring?
We had, and I think this is good work. So I want to frame it in a way that respects my colleagues, but we've done a lot of direct service where we, as funder, are a service provider. And I think that that is a space I'm not interested in as much as kind of building the capacity of a community or institution or entity to provide those services themselves. So we stopped our direct service programming slowly, though, because I hate endings. So I've been able to drag it on for a long time.
I think it's very challenging for those of us individuals and organizations that have been historically marginalized, because we are the ones that are not the investment bakers and don't have access to the wealth. And so I think you're doing it because your values align with that. But how do we like institutionalize that or make that a way of working? And that's a huge question to put on the table now.
Well, Kelly, this is the work you do. So this is the work I am learning from you, because so even in your job descriptions, you're very explicit about race. We believe Black Lives Matter, stuff like that. So I think there's parallels here of like race language that isn't talked about in such a candid way in a lot of these spaces. And the more we do talk about it, maybe there's some healing and some societal healing around it as well. I do like how you're saying that you can kind of build in equitable ways of practice in the RFPs or in the interviews or in the job descriptions. Like, I don't even like filling out applications or RFPs, and that could be like a neurodivergence brain issue. So I'm definitely not the person to talk to about that. But I think it's like, if I'm talking about survival, if I'm straight up like, I'm trying to help you survive right now in this system, like, come with me. I'm going to hook you up with these people. Like, it's a much more of like, it is relational if you want to be real. Thinking about the better future or like ways to try to manage that now, I feel like it's more the space that you're in. So that's what I want to learn more from that, to be honest.
One of the things that comes up in conversations with a lot of organizations I work with is they talk about how funders always fund the same people. It's cliques. How do you break in? And so like there's also this tension here, right? Where like the proposals aren't really that effective. RFPs are more structured than they are meaningful. It's the emergent, messy conversations that tend to lead and become more meaningful. And also, how do I gain the purchase, the power, the access to be able to start and have that conversation with someone? So this is all really beautifully rich. And I've lost my question.
I don't know. What do you have any thoughts? What is this bringing up for you? Are you like, God, this is bread and butter stuff, or like, is this what you expect to hear from a funder? Like, what's the observation?
No, this is interesting. I think like one of the things that people always talked about in this workshop is like that it's cliques. I have to break in somehow. And the answer that I give, never having been a funder, is funders' context and their own risk management. And like they're trying to accomplish a set of objectives. They have things to protect, not just their own career and their own reputation, but also the work. That act of working with the same folks or working with relationships has to do with your own ability to trust and build, like manage risk, as opposed to I give money to my friends. Like if you have thoughts about that dynamic.
I think it's really good advice. I love the way that you talk to folks, Jeffrey, of just letting them know like you're really humanizing the experience of both sides. I think that funders often have more on their plate than people realize. Like the expectations of roles is intense, and they're not sitting around all day waiting for people to fund them or to fund or to pitch. I actively try to get no pitches, like real pitches, and I actively try to give no pitches. Like I just think pitches in general are draining, soul sucking things. I'm not thinking about managing risk in the traditional sense or like friends of friends. I think that a lot of times there's like leaders or people on your team or board that have influence in who you should be funding, and that makes a big difference regardless of what your scale is. You respond to the people that respond to you. I don't know. I try not to have a risk mentality of like these are high risk because we don't know them and these are low risk, but I am very clear of like I want to fund maybe someone like bilingual reporters or leaders of color. So I guess there are things I'm managing in order to try to have the greatest impact, not something that's like, these are just my homies, so I want to work with them.
Yeah, and I think that something that's come across in this conversation for me, hearing from you, Misty, it's like, will philanthropy hire a bunch of Misties or not? Is there tolerance for people that are willing to operate like you in philanthropy? Because it's something to unpack more.
I have a leader that creates space for these types of conversations on the team, and it's really supportive and a really strong community leader and believes in philanthropy. Like, I don't even believe in philanthropy, but like, I truly think that my boss does. So when you think of inside philanthropy, I think leadership is important.
Thanks to Misty Avila for showing up with so much clarity, humor, and honesty, and for saying the quiet parts out loud.
If you want to dig deeper into the ideas we talk about here, power, relationships, and how money actually moves, you can check out our workshops at aspirationtech.org/HTRM.
Funders on Fundraising is co-produced by Chris Lawrence, plus Decca Hussein Wetzel and Andrew Calloway of Urbanist Media. Editing and mixing also by Urbanist Media. It is hosted by me, Kelly James of Education First Consulting.
And me, Jeffrey McDougall of Aspiration. Our cover art is by Ben Johnson, and our theme music is by Evan Greer.
This podcast is a production of Aspiration.
This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The views expressed belong to the individuals, not their organizations.
To hear more episodes, find show notes, or get in touch, visit aspirationtech.org/podcast.